Every society teaches obedience. From childhood, we're told to sit still, follow rules, and not question authority. But beneath the surface, obedience carries a hidden debt, one paid not in money, but in silence, lost potential, and broken individuality. The obedient mind may look calm, but inside it suffocates under chains of fear, conformity, and control. The greatest tragedies in history were not always caused by rebels, but by those who obeyed without hesitation. This audiobook peels back the layers of blind submission, exposing the unseen cost we carry when we surrender thought for comfort and freedom for safety. Step closer, and you'll discover that the most dangerous prison is not built of walls, it is built within the mind itself. Obedience often wears the mask of virtue. From childhood, we are praised when we comply and scolded when we resist. Teachers, parents, and leaders reinforce the lesson that following rules equals goodness, and questioning them equals defiance. Yet beneath this surface, praise lies a hidden cost, a debt that builds quietly over time. Each unquestioned yes chips away at individuality, shaping a mind that no longer knows the power of its own voice. The silent debt of obedience is not measured in money, but in lost opportunities. Every time someone chooses silence instead of expression, a chance to change the course of events slips away. History has countless examples where atrocities were enabled not just by those who commanded them, but by those who obeyed without resistance. The debt grows with each surrendered choice, creating a society where compliance replaces conscience. For the obedient mind, peace often comes at the expense of truth. When people suppress their doubts to maintain harmony, they trade authenticity for acceptance. The words left unspoken, the questions never asked, and the thoughts never explored accumulate like hidden weights. Over time, this debt can suffocate the spirit, leaving a hollow shell that looks content but feels empty. Obedience also rewrites identity. A person who constantly bends to the will of others begins to forget their own shape. They no longer act from conviction, but from habit, echoing the voices of authority instead of their own. This erosion of self is subtle but profound, creating a gap between who someone is and who they might have become if they had dared to resist. The debt is generational. When parents teach children to obey blindly, those children grow into adults who repeat the cycle. They raise their own children under the same unexamined rules, perpetuating conformity across time. The silent debt doesn't just belong to one person. It becomes a cultural inheritance, passed like an heirloom of chains from one generation to the next. Fear is the interest added to this debt. Obedience teaches people to fear stepping out of line, to dread punishment, shame, or exclusion. This fear becomes so ingrained that even when no authority is present, the mind polices itself. The obedient mind whispers, "Don't question, don't challenge, don't risk." In this way, obedience becomes self-sustaining, reinforcing its own power. Yet the world rarely remembers those who obey without question. The legacies we honor belong to those who spoke against silence, who paid the price of defiance instead of the debt of submission. Blind obedience leaves no footprint in history, except as a warning. Its debt is anonymity, invisibility, and the quiet loss of meaning. What is safe in the moment becomes costly across a lifetime. Even within families and workplaces, the obedient mind extracts payment. People who never express their needs build resentment, which corrodes relationships. Leaders surrounded by yes men make poor decisions, blind to truth. Friendships fracture under the weight of unspoken truths. The silent debt of obedience is paid not just by the obedient, but by everyone around them who suffers from their silence. The debt of obedience also robs societies of progress. Innovation depends on questioning, on challenging norms, on asking, what if? Obedience punishes this curiosity, leaving systems stagnant and unjust practices unchallenged. The price is seen in cultures that fear change, organizations that collapse under rigidity, and governments that decay because no one dares to question their foundations. To see the debt clearly is the first step to breaking free from it. Once we recognize that obedience is not neutral but costly, we can begin to weigh its value against its price. The challenge is not to reject all rules, but to choose consciously when to obey and when to resist. True freedom comes not from endless rebellion, but from refusing to pay with silence what should be invested in truth. Chains are not always made of iron. Some are forged in habits, fears, and unchallenged beliefs. The obedient mind learns its lessons not in classrooms, but in silent compliance. Every do as you're told etches a mark, shaping thought into submission. Over time, these invisible chains teach people not only what to think, but more dangerously, what not to think. They become lessons written on the soul, unseen but deeply felt. Obedience teaches that safety is more valuable than truth. The lesson seems harmless at first. Keep quiet, stay in line, avoid trouble, but repeated enough, it becomes a lifelong pattern. Those who live by this creed rarely take risks, rarely challenge authority, and rarely step beyond the boundaries drawn for them. Safety becomes a cage disguised as comfort, and freedom is sacrificed in the name of peace. Another lesson written in chains is that approval is worth more than authenticity. The obedient mind learns to seek validation, to mold itself into whatever image will be accepted. Compliments replace convictions, and applause becomes the measure of worth. This dependency on external approval creates fragile identities, easily broken when praise is withheld or criticism appears. Chains of obedience are often gilded with smiles. Obedience also teaches people to distrust their own intuition. When instincts whisper resistance but authority commands compliance, the obedient mind learns to silence itself. Over time, inner voices grow faint, replaced by the louder echoes of external expectations. Decisions become less about what feels right and more about what pleases others. The chain tightens as individuals lose faith in their own judgment. The obedient mind learns endurance, but not empowerment. Chains teach people to bear discomfort silently, to accept injustice as inevitable, to normalize suffering. Instead of channeling energy into change, it is spent on survival. These lessons may create resilience, but it is resilience without growth, strength wasted on tolerating chains instead of breaking them. Chains also teach invisibility. The obedient mind learns that blending in ensures survival, while standing out invites punishment. People shrink themselves, mute their voices, and dull their brilliance in order to avoid notice. This lesson becomes second nature, leaving talents undiscovered and dreams unexplored. The debt of this lesson is not just personal, it robs the world of potential contributions. A darker lesson is that power belongs only to others. The obedient mind internalizes the idea that leaders lead and followers follow, and nothing can change that order. This belief sustains systems of inequality, because those in chains no longer imagine themselves without them. Obedience convinces them that questioning power is futile, and so power remains unchallenged. Obedience also teaches that silence equals virtue. Many grow up believing that quietness equals discipline, that compliance equals respect. But silence in the face of injustice is not respect, it is complicity. The obedient mind, however, cannot see this distinction. It learns to equate silence with goodness, even as it enables harm to thrive unopposed. Even in personal lives, chains write painful lessons. A child raised to never question grows into an adult who struggles with self-expression. A partner trained to obey suppresses their needs until resentment poisons love. A worker who never challenges unfair rules becomes a cog in a machine that exploits them. Lessons written in chains are rarely forgotten, even when the chains themselves are removed. But every lesson written in chains carries within it a hidden possibility, the chance to unlearn. Recognizing the patterns, questioning their origin, and daring to resist can rewrite the story. Chains may scar, but scars can become symbols of survival and change. The most powerful lesson is not the one written by obedience, but the one learned by breaking free, that the mind was never meant to live in chains. The mind that bows too easily is not born that way. It is shaped by years of conditioning. From childhood, rewards are given for compliance and punishment for resistance. This pattern trains the brain to equate obedience with survival and defiance with danger. Over time, bowing becomes instinct, a reflex rather than a conscious choice. What begins as adaptation quietly evolves into submission. Such a mind learns to trade its voice for approval. Every time it lowers itself before authority, it exchanges authenticity for acceptance. The more this trade occurs, the less it remembers its own convictions. Eventually, the obedient mind becomes a mirror, reflecting only the desires of others, while forgetting the image of itself. It bows not because it agrees, but because it fears standing tall. The ease of bowing lies in the illusion of peace. By yielding quickly, conflict is avoided, and life appears smoother. Yet beneath this surface, calm, lurks dissatisfaction. Those who bow too easily often carry quiet resentment, frustrated by their own inability to resist. Their silence may keep the waters still, but inside, storms rage that no one else sees. The bowing mind mistakes survival for success. It convinces itself that living without confrontation is a form of wisdom. But in truth, wisdom is not in avoiding battles, but in choosing the right ones. A life spent bowing may feel safe, but it rarely feels meaningful. To confuse avoidance with achievement is one of the greatest tragedies of blind obedience. In workplaces, the mind that bows too easily becomes exploited. Employers value compliance, but often take advantage of it. The employee who never questions, never challenges, and never demands better treatment becomes invisible in decision-making. Promotions bypass them, credit is taken from them, and yet they remain silent. Their willingness to bow becomes the very reason they are overlooked. In relationships, bowing too easily corrodes trust. A partner who never expresses disagreement may seem agreeable, but in truth they rob the relationship of honesty. Real intimacy requires conflict, vulnerability, and truth. By always yielding, the obedient mind prevents true connection. What looks like harmony is often just fear dressed in politeness. The bowing mind also cripples innovation. Progress comes from questioning norms, from daring to say, "What if things could be different?" Those who bow easily rarely ask such questions. Instead, they protect the status quo, even when it harms them. Societies filled with obedient minds stagnate, repeating patterns instead of breaking them. Innovation suffocates under the weight of conformity. Fear is the root of such easy submission. Fear of rejection, fear of punishment, fear of conflict, all bind the mind in invisible chains. These fears magnify authority figures into giants and shrink the self into a shadow. To bow feels safer than to risk. Yet the price of this safety is freedom itself, surrendered piece by piece until little remains. The obedient mind mistakes politeness for virtue. It believes that never saying no is a mark of goodness. But true virtue is not silent compliance. It is integrity. Integrity demands courage to stand for what is right, even when it offends. A bowed head may look humble, but if it hides cowardice, it betrays both self and truth. History is filled with the consequences of minds that bowed too easily. Tyrants rose not only through force, but through the silence of those who refused to resist. The Holocaust, apartheid, and countless oppressions thrived because obedience outweighed conscience. These tragedies remind us that blind submission is not harmless. It is the fuel that powers injustice. On the personal level, bowing too easily erodes self-respect. Each time someone silences themselves, they feel a little smaller. The accumulation of such moments creates an identity built on compromise rather than conviction. This internal erosion is often invisible to others, but deeply painful to the self. A bowed mind cannot stand proudly in its own reflection. Chains of obedience are often disguised as loyalty. The bowed mind may justify submission as devotion to family, culture, or community, but true loyalty should not demand silence in the face of harm. When obedience is mistaken for loyalty, it traps individuals in cycles of exploitation, where love becomes control and respect becomes fear. The bowing mind forgets the power of choice. It acts as if obedience is destiny, when in reality, every bow is a decision. Recognizing this truth can be liberating. Even in environments where authority seems absolute, the choice to question, to resist, to stand tall remains. Awareness is the first crack in the armor of blind submission. Education plays a critical role in breaking this cycle. A system that teaches memorization without critical thinking produces minds conditioned to bow. But education that encourages questioning, debate, and curiosity nurtures resilience. A society can only resist oppression if its citizens are taught not just what to think, but how to think. Religion and culture, too, shape whether minds bow or stand tall. When doctrines are interpreted as unquestionable, they create generations of submission. But when faith and tradition are taught as living dialogues rather than rigid rules, they empower. The difference lies not in belief itself, but in whether belief demands blind obedience or conscious engagement. The bowing mind often dreams of rebellion, but lacks the courage to act. Silent fantasies of speaking out, walking away, or saying no fill the mind, but rarely leave the lips. This gap between desire and action creates frustration, even self-loathing. Over time, it convinces itself rebellion is impossible, forgetting that courage is built through small acts, not grand gestures. Children watch and learn from bowed minds. When parents submit without question, children internalize the same lesson. They grow into adults who carry the same pattern, perpetuating cycles of obedience across generations. Breaking this cycle requires modeling resistance, showing that standing tall is possible, even when difficult. Example is the greatest teacher. Technology exposes the dangers of bowing in the modern world. Misinformation spreads when people accept headlines without questioning sources. Algorithms thrive on obedient minds that consume without critical thought. In this sense, the digital age demands resistance more than ever. To bow too easily before screens and voices of authority is to surrender agency in a world already shaped by manipulation. The mind that bows too easily may believe it avoids pain, but in truth, it multiplies it. The pain of repression, the pain of invisibility, the pain of regret, all outweigh the temporary discomfort of defiance. A bowed life may be quiet, but it is rarely fulfilling. Pain deferred is not pain erased. It is simply postponed and amplified. The choice is simple. Continue bowing and pay the price, or rise and reclaim the self. A bowed head cannot see the horizon, but a lifted one discovers possibility. The mind that bows too easily must learn that obedience is not the path to peace, but the slow erosion of identity. To rise even once is to remember the mind was never built to live on its knees. Commands are powerful, not only because they demand action, but because they bury questions. When authority speaks, truth is often the first casualty. Orders rarely invite dialogue. They silence it. The obedient mind grows accustomed to following without asking, and in doing so, it buries its ability to see clearly. Truth, hidden beneath layers of commands, becomes a forgotten treasure. The most dangerous commands are not the ones shouted loudly, but the ones delivered quietly and repeatedly. Subtle instructions, like don't ask too much or just trust the system, slowly shape the mind. These phrases carve trenches where independent thought once flowed. The truth is not destroyed. It is buried under repetition and routine, unseen yet always present. Commands create an illusion of certainty. When told what to do, people feel secure, as if the world has become simpler. But simplicity often comes at the expense of truth. Reality is complex, layered, and filled with contradictions. Commands flatten these complexities, replacing them with a single rigid path. In this flattening, truth loses its texture and disappears. Obedience to commands rewires the relationship between fear and freedom. The mind, once curious, becomes anxious about breaking rules. Fear of punishment overshadows the search for truth. Over time, individuals stop questioning, not because answers don't exist, but because fear convinces them not to seek. Thus, fear becomes the soil in which buried truths remain hidden. In families, commands bury truth within generations. A child told, "Don't question your elders," learns that hierarchy matters more than honesty. That child grows into an adult who carries the same lesson, silencing their own doubts. What could have been discussions of wisdom become rehearsals of obedience. The truth of curiosity, creativity, and growth lies buried beneath the weight of "because I said so." In schools, commands often take precedence over inquiry. Students learn to memorize answers rather than challenge them, to repeat lessons rather than test them. Education becomes less about seeking truth and more about following rules. A classroom that rewards obedience over curiosity produces adults skilled at compliance, but impoverished in critical thought. Truth is buried beneath standardized commands. Workplaces, too, reinforce this burial. Employees are told to follow protocol, even when the system is broken, to respect the chain of command. Even when leaders are wrong, these rules create environments where truth cannot breathe. Whistleblowers are punished, innovators are silenced, and the obedient are rewarded. Commands maintain order, but they bury potential. Political systems thrive on commands that obscure truth. Propaganda works not by eliminating facts, but by overwhelming them with orders. Citizens are told what to believe, what to fear, and what to support. Truth becomes secondary to loyalty. The obedient citizen learns to repeat slogans instead of asking questions. Buried beneath the chorus of obedience, truth fades into whispers. Even religion, when misused, can bury truth beneath commands. Faith, meant to be a path to meaning, becomes a set of rigid rules enforced by fear of punishment. Spirituality transforms into compliance, with truth reduced to doctrine. When commands replace dialogue with the divine, faith becomes less about discovery and more about control. Truth lies beneath the stone of dogma, waiting to be uncovered. Commands also distort morality. Instead of asking, "Is this right?" the obedient mind asks, "Is this allowed?" Ethics becomes detached from conscience and tethered to authority. Atrocities are committed not because people don't know the truth, but because they bury it under the shield of just following orders. The mind learns to confuse legality with morality, burying truth beneath compliance. The burial of truth doesn't just silence individuals, it reshapes entire cultures. A society conditioned to obey loses its collective courage to confront lies. Generations pass, and falsehood becomes tradition, while truth becomes myth. By the time someone dares to dig for it, the layers of command have hardened into stone. What was once obvious now feels revolutionary. The cost of buried truth is visible in history's darkest chapters: genocides, wars, and systemic injustices. All thrived not only because of tyrants, but because of countless who obeyed commands without question. Truth was not absent. It was buried beneath fear and compliance. Those who uncovered it often paid with their lives, reminding us how heavy the debt of obedience can be. On a personal level, buried truth creates inner conflict. People obey commands that betray their values, silencing the voice within. This dissonance breeds anxiety, guilt, and resentment. The obedient mind may look calm on the outside, but inside it wrestles with truths it cannot ignore. The weight of buried honesty is often heavier than open conflict. Commands also shape language itself. When people are taught what words they can or cannot use, entire realities are buried. Language becomes sanitized, stripped of dissent. Without words to express truth, thoughts weaken and silence spreads. In this way, commands not only bury truth, they erase the tools needed to uncover it again. Technology magnifies this burial in the modern era. Algorithms and systems give commands in subtle ways: what to click, what to watch, what to believe. People obey without realizing they are obeying, and truth is buried beneath digital noise. The obedient mind consumes without questioning, confusing information overload with knowledge. The more commands are followed, the deeper the truth is buried. Yet buried truth never dies completely. It waits, like seeds beneath soil, ready to surface when conditions change. Even in the most obedient societies, whispers of dissent remain: a question here, a story there, a memory passed in secret. These fragments preserve truth against the weight of commands. They remind us that silence cannot fully erase what is real. Unburying truth requires courage. It means resisting commands, asking questions, and enduring the consequences of defiance. It requires individuals willing to risk disapproval, punishment, or even exile. The act of digging for truth is never easy, but it is always necessary. Without such effort, the obedient mind remains trapped in illusion. Freedom begins with the refusal to bury truth any longer. This does not mean rejecting all authority, but choosing which commands serve justice and which silence it. It means reclaiming the right to question, to challenge, to think independently. When truth rises above commands, it restores dignity to both the individual and society. The lesson of truth buried beneath commands is this: obedience without thought is dangerous, not noble. Commands can bring order, but they should never cost honesty. The mind that learns to balance respect with resistance uncovers truths that change lives. To follow blindly is to live in shadow, but to question is to bring light back to the buried. Compliance often looks harmless. A person follows instructions, rules are obeyed, and systems function without disruption. From the outside, it appears efficient, even admirable. But beneath this calm exterior lies an invisible cost. Compliance erodes individuality, dulls critical thinking, and slowly replaces curiosity with silence. What looks like order on the surface often conceals decay beneath. The cost of compliance is paid first in thought. Every time the mind silences a doubt, it trades authenticity for convenience. Over time, people stop exploring possibilities because their thoughts are tethered to what is permitted. Imagination, once boundless, narrows into predictable lines. The invisible loss here is not just creativity. It is the very capacity to question reality. Another hidden price lies in moral compromise. People often obey rules, even when those rules conflict with conscience. Compliance tells them it is safer to follow than to resist. This creates inner dissonance. They know what is right, but choose what is easy. Each compromise, invisible to others, leaves scars on the soul. The cost is integrity, quietly surrendered. Compliance also kills accountability. When people follow orders blindly, they shift responsibility to those above them. "I was just doing my job" becomes the excuse for harmful actions. The invisible price is the loss of moral ownership. The compliant mind avoids blame in the moment, but the long-term cost is guilt, shame, and a fractured sense of self. In workplaces, the invisible cost shows up as wasted potential. Employees who comply without questioning may complete tasks, but they rarely innovate. They hold back ideas that could improve systems, fearing rejection or reprimand. Over time, entire organizations stagnate, trapped in mediocrity. The invisible cost is not just personal. It becomes economic, cultural, and systemic. Compliance is also paid for in silence. Voices that could challenge injustice remain quiet. Communities that might resist oppression allow it to spread. Silence becomes complicity, though no one names it. The invisible cost is borne not just by the compliant, but by those harmed by the systems they refuse to question. History remembers the silence as loudly as the crimes. Relationships, too, suffer under invisible compliance. A partner who always agrees may seem supportive, but true intimacy requires honesty. By hiding their needs and desires, they weaken the bond over time. What looks like harmony is often repression. The invisible cost is trust eroded slowly, until love itself feels shallow and unreal. The mind pays another hidden price: loss of resilience. Those who always comply rarely build the courage to stand alone. When life demands independence, they struggle. They crumble in the face of uncertainty, because obedience has atrophied their strength. The invisible cost is the loss of self-reliance, a weakness that appears only when resistance is required. Compliance reshapes culture in subtle ways. A society that values conformity above all gradually stops producing pioneers. Children grow up learning to fit in rather than to stand out. Art, science, and innovation fade under the weight of sameness. The invisible cost is progress deferred, generations robbed of breakthroughs that obedience suffocated. The education system often buries these costs. Students are praised for neat answers, not for bold questions. They learn compliance as if it were intelligence, mistaking memorization for mastery. But the real damage appears later, when adults lack curiosity or courage. The invisible cost is a society rich in degrees, but poor in wisdom. The compliant mind also loses time. Years pass in routines that never challenge the spirit. People stay in jobs they hate, relationships that suffocate, or roles that diminish them, all because compliance whispers, "Don't risk it." The invisible price is not measured in money, but in decades lost to a life unlived. Health is not immune to the cost of compliance. Stress builds in those who silence themselves daily. The body absorbs what the mouth will not say. Headaches, anxiety, and depression often trace back to compliance that suppressed expression. The invisible cost is vitality, drained quietly, until both body and spirit are weary. Compliance narrows freedom of choice. The obedient mind often forgets it has options. By always bowing to authority, it loses the muscle of decision-making. Eventually, compliance feels natural and freedom feels frightening. The invisible cost here is autonomy. the slow erosion of the ability to choose one's own path with confidence. Compliance also hides within tradition. Families pass down patterns of obedience, calling them respect. Children learn to comply before they learn to question. This inheritance seems noble but perpetuates silence across generations. The invisible cost is that cultural wisdom remains frozen, unable to grow, trapped beneath the weight of unquestioned habits. Injustice thrives on invisible compliance. Oppressive systems rely not only on leaders but on millions who follow without thought. Every small act of compliance strengthens the machinery of control. Each bowed head is another brick in the wall. The invisible cost is freedom lost, not by force, but by countless acts of silent cooperation. Compliance also limits courage in moments of crisis. People conditioned to obey struggle to step into leadership when it matters most. They wait for permission, even when urgency demands initiative. The invisible price is opportunity wasted. Moments where a single act of defiance could have changed everything, but obedience kept it buried. Technology magnifies this cost. Algorithms guide what we see, hear, and believe. When we comply with these systems passively, our thoughts narrow into curated boxes. The invisible cost is independence of thought, quietly surrendered to unseen machines. Compliance in the digital age is more subtle but far more pervasive. The tragedy of compliance is that it often feels easier in the moment. Saying yes avoids conflict. Following orders keeps things smooth. But this short-term ease hides long-term damage. The invisible cost grows with each small surrender, until one day, the compliant mind realizes it has nothing left to call its own. Yet, compliance is not destiny. The invisible cost can be revealed and resisted. It begins with awareness asking, why am I doing this? Who benefits from my silence? What is lost when I comply? These questions dig up the hidden price and restore power to the individual. Once seen, the cost can no longer be ignored. The invisible cost of compliance is the quiet theft of freedom, creativity, and truth. Obedience has its place, but blind compliance drains life of its color. To see the cost clearly is to take the first step toward reclaiming choice. The invisible chains can be broken, not by rebellion alone, but by courage to think, to question, and to live authentically. A spirit cannot be fully silenced, no matter how strong the cage. Even within the obedient mind, quiet whispers persist, echoes of desires, questions, and dreams that refuse to die. These whispers are faint, often drowned by the noise of commands and routines, but they remain alive. They are reminders that freedom never disappears, it only hides. The caged spirit whispers through longing. In the midst of daily obedience, a sudden ache arises, a wish for something more, something different. The obedient mind tries to dismiss it as foolishness, yet the longing persists. These whispers are not weakness. They are signals that the soul still remembers what freedom feels like, even if the body has forgotten. Silence cannot erase memory. The caged spirit remembers childhood curiosity, moments of courage and dreams once pursued. Though buried under years of compliance, these memories speak softly. They whisper, "You were not always bowed. You once stood tall." These reminders irritate the obedient mind, yet they are proof that submission is not natural, it is learned. Whispers of the caged spirit often surface in solitude. When the noise of commands fades, the mind hears its own suppressed voice. These whispers question the choices made, the paths abandoned, and the truths ignored. In silence, obedience loosens its grip, just enough for the spirit to be heard. And in that hearing, seeds of defiance take root. The spirit whispers through imagination, Daydreams of a different life, one filled with courage, honesty, and freedom, emerge when obedience grows heavy. These imagined worlds may feel unreachable, yet they are glimpses of what is possible. Obedience calls them distractions, but in truth, they are blueprints of liberation. Imagination is the spirit's rebellion against the cage. The cage spirit also speaks through unease. Restlessness, frustration, and discontent often haunt the obedient mind. These emotions are not flaws. They are messages. They whisper that something is wrong, that submission has a cost. Many mistake this unease for weakness, but it is the spirit's way of demanding recognition. It cannot stay buried forever. At times, the spirit whispers through small acts of resistance. A delayed nod, a quiet no, or a hidden act of defiance may seem insignificant, but they are cracks in the cage. Each whisper of resistance weakens the bars. Though obedience may still dominate, the spirit shows it has not surrendered entirely. It waits, gathering strength in silence. Dreams carry the whispers more boldly. In sleep, when the conscious mind is subdued, the spirit speaks freely. Dreams of flight, of breaking chains, of shouting truths fill the obedient sleeper. Upon waking, these dreams are dismissed, but they leave an imprint. The spirit whispers, "This is what freedom could feel like." Dreams become maps of possibility. Whispers of the caged spirit are also heard in envy. Seeing others live boldly stirs admiration mixed with longing. The obedient mind tries to hide the jealousy, but the spirit insists, "You could do this too." Envy, though uncomfortable, is often a whisper in disguise, a reminder of what has been surrendered but not lost. The caged spirit speaks most powerfully in moments of injustice. Witnessing harm, cruelty, or dishonesty awakens a voice that refuses silence. The obedient mind struggles, torn between safety and truth. Yet the spirit whispers louder, urging action. These are the moments where obedience cracks and conscience pushes through, demanding to be heard. The whispers grow louder with awareness. Once the obedient mind recognizes the cage, the spirit no longer whispers, it speaks. The realization that life has been lived in chains is painful, but also liberating. Awareness turns whispers into questions, questions into choices, and choices into action. The cage may still stand, but it begins to weaken. Art often carries the whispers of caged spirits. Music, poetry, and painting have long been the languages of souls, refusing silence. Even under oppression, art becomes rebellion, a whisper turned into a song. For the obedient mind, creating or experiencing art can awaken truths buried beneath commands. Art is the spirit's voice disguised as beauty. Whispers also appear as guilt. The obedient mind feels shame for its silence, regret for its submission, and sorrow for lost opportunities. Though painful, this guilt is not punishment. It is the spirit's way of reminding the self of its responsibility. Guilt is the whisper of a conscience that refuses to die, even when buried. The spirit whispers through courage, borrowed from others. Stories of rebels, reformers, and heroes resonate deeply. The obedient mind admires them outwardly, but inwardly feels a stirring. The spirit whispers, "Their courage is proof that yours exists too." Inspiration is contagious. It plants defiance where obedience once ruled. The caged spirit also whispers through love. Love for family, friends, or community creates moments where obedience falters. To protect what is cherished, people find strength they didn't know they had. Obedience bows to commands, but love answers to something higher. In this way, love becomes the spirit's loudest whisper, impossible to ignore. The whispers may also appear as anger. Obedience often breeds quiet resentment, which builds over time. The spirit transforms this resentment into fire. Though the obedient mind tries to suppress it, anger eventually escapes, pushing boundaries, breaking silence. This anger is not destruction. It is the spirit insisting that dignity must be restored. Whispers of the caged spirit rarely vanish completely, even in lives lived entirely in obedience. There are moments of quiet longing, a sigh, a pause, a reflective thought. These are the spirit's echoes. They remind us that no cage, however strong, can erase freedom entirely. The spirit may be subdued, but it never surrenders fully. Breaking free begins with listening. The whispers, though faint, are guides. They point to what has been lost and what must be reclaimed. The obedient mind fears them, but the spirit knows they are the path forward. To listen is to acknowledge the truth that obedience has a cost and freedom demands courage. Once the whispers are heard, they grow into voices. Questions become louder, defiance becomes bolder, and silence begins to fracture. The cage may still exist, but its power weakens with every step toward authenticity. The spirit once muted now demands to be seen, felt, and lived. Whispers transform into a roar. The whispers of a caged spirit remind us of one truth. Obedience can bind actions, but it cannot erase the soul's hunger for freedom. The spirit's quiet voice is proof of resilience, a spark that survives even in darkness. To heed these whispers is to begin the journey from silence to liberation, from submission to selfhood. Loyalty is often celebrated as the highest of virtues, but when it goes unquestioned, it becomes a burden. Blind devotion to a person, system, or belief silences critical thought. The obedient mind interprets loyalty as unconditional obedience, forgetting that true loyalty should include honesty and accountability. The weight of such loyalty crushes individuality, turning devotion into bondage. The danger of unquestioned loyalty is that it replaces truth with allegiance. When loyalty becomes absolute, facts no longer matter. Only the preservation of the bond. Friends, followers, or citizens may defend wrong actions simply because of attachment to the person or cause. This misplaced loyalty buries truth under layers of justification, protecting the bond while eroding integrity. Unquestioned loyalty creates imbalance in relationships. One partner may sacrifice endlessly, believing loyalty demands silence and endurance. Over time, this sacrifice breeds resentment, for devotion without reciprocity drains the spirit. What begins as love or duty transforms into quiet suffering. The weight of loyalty carried alone can collapse even the strongest of bonds. Leaders thrive on unquestioned loyalty. Dictators, corrupt officials, and abusive bosses rely on followers who refuse to challenge them. Loyalty, when blind, feeds power without restraint. History reveals countless examples of cruelty sustained not by tyrants alone, but by loyal supporters who refuse to question. The weight of their obedience is shared by entire nations. The obedient mind often confuses loyalty with virtue. To bow, to obey, to remain silent. These acts are framed as signs of dedication. Yet real virtue requires the courage to confront wrongs, even when they come from those we love or respect. Unquestioned loyalty twists this principle, rewarding silence over honesty and devotion over conscience. In families, unquestioned loyalty perpetuates cycles of harm. Children raised to protect family secrets learn that loyalty means silence, even in the face of abuse or injustice. This heavy expectation molds them into adults who carry the same burden. The family remains intact, but the individuals within it suffer under the invisible weight of unquestioned bonds. Workplaces also exploit loyalty. Employees who remain faithful to companies, even when mistreated, are often praised. Yet this loyalty is rarely repaid. Organizations replace workers without hesitation. The cost of such devotion is years of unrecognized labor, lost opportunities, and the erosion of self-worth. The weight of loyalty benefits institutions but breaks individuals. Unquestioned loyalty can also blind communities. Groups that value loyalty above truth may defend harmful traditions or toxic leaders. Members who question are branded as traitors, their honesty treated as betrayal. Over time, loyalty becomes a chain that prevents growth. The weight of loyalty keeps communities stagnant, locked in outdated patterns. Even in friendships, blind loyalty can become corrosive. A friend who always defends another, regardless of their actions, sacrifices honesty for the sake of bond. Over time, this dishonesty undermines trust. What looks like loyalty is in truth fear of losing connection. The spirit suffers quietly, weighed down by truths that remain unspoken. The heaviest cost of unquestioned loyalty is moral blindness. People excuse harmful actions simply because they come from those they are loyal to. Loyalty replaces conscience, and accountability vanishes. The obedient mind finds comfort in saying, "I stood by them no matter what," forgetting that loyalty without truth is complicity. The weight is not noble. It is destructive. Unquestioned loyalty thrives in fear. Followers fear losing favor. Citizens fear punishment, and family members fear rejection. This fear disguises itself as devotion, convincing people that silence is loyalty. But true loyalty does not demand fear. It demands courage. The weight of fear disguised as loyalty suffocates growth and suppresses freedom. The obedient mind often mistakes endurance for strength. It believes that carrying the weight of loyalty, no matter how heavy, proves resilience. Yet endurance without purpose is suffering, not strength. The heaviest burdens are not those placed on us by enemies, but those we choose to carry for the sake of unquestioned devotion. Unquestioned loyalty robs individuals of their voice. The duty to protect, defend, and obey leaves little room for personal expression. Over time, the loyal person forgets their own needs, dreams, and truths. The voice that might have spoken against injustice grows quiet. The weight of loyalty presses down until silence feels natural, even when it destroys identity. Cults and extremist groups thrive on this burden. Leaders manipulate loyalty, demanding sacrifice and unquestioned devotion. Members obey even harmful commands, convinced that loyalty proves their worth. This blind faith is heavy, but it feels honorable to the obedient mind. The weight is carried willingly, even as it leads to destruction. The weight of loyalty can fracture societies. Citizens who defend leaders out of devotion, regardless of corruption, enable systems of oppression. The loyalty of the masses becomes the shield of the powerful. The cost is borne by generations, as loyalty to rulers outweighs loyalty to justice. The silent weight of devotion sustains tyranny, yet the whispers of conscience always remain. Even the most loyal mind feels the unease of suppressed truth. Guilt, doubt, and frustration creep in, reminding the loyal that something is wrong. This inner conflict is the spirit resisting the weight, urging the person to question. Loyalty may bury truth, but it cannot erase it completely. True loyalty must include honesty. To stand by someone means more than silent obedience. It means helping them see their flaws, guiding them back to integrity. Loyalty without truth is not loyalty at all. It is fear disguised as devotion. The weight of loyalty becomes lighter only when carried with honesty and accountability. The obedient mind can unlearn blind devotion by asking simple questions. Does this loyalty serve truth? Does it build justice? The chains of unquestioned loyalty weaken, loyalty should uplift both the giver and the receiver, not destroy one for the benefit of the other. The shift begins with courage to balance devotion with truth. The weight of unquestioned loyalty is not noble sacrifice, but silent surrender. It demands conformity at the expense of conscience, devotion at the expense of truth. To lighten the burden, one must dare to question, even when it feels like betrayal. True loyalty uplifts, while blind loyalty enslaves. The choice between the two defines whether loyalty becomes a gift or a cage. Order is often seen as the foundation of civilization, but when it demands silence, it becomes a weapon. Many voices are broken, not by violence, but by the quiet pressure to maintain peace. The obedient mind learns that questioning order is dangerous, that silence is safer than dissent. Over time, voices fracture, leaving echoes of truth that never find their way into the open. The cost of order imposed without dialogue is hidden in the lives of those silenced. Workers who notice injustice at their jobs remain quiet for fear of losing livelihoods. Citizens who see corruption stay silent for fear of reprisal. Families who suffer under unfair traditions bury their voices to preserve appearances. In each case, the demand for order smothers truth. Broken voices are often disguised as respect. The obedient mind believes that remaining silent before authority is honorable, yet respect without honesty is hollow. When voices are silenced under the name of order, what remains is not harmony, but fear. The outward appearance of respect hides an inward erosion of dignity. Voices are also broken by repetition. When people are told often enough that their words are unimportant, they begin to believe it. Commands, ridicule, or dismissals chip away at their willingness to speak. The mind stops offering its truths, not because they vanish, but because it no longer expects to be heard. Order thrives, but authenticity dies. The tragedy is that silence rarely ensures true peace. Instead, it creates suppressed tension that eventually erupts. Voices broken in the name of order may remain quiet for years, but resentment builds beneath the surface. When it finally breaks free, the eruption is often destructive, fueled by years of silenced truths. Order maintained through silence is never permanent. In politics, broken voices become the foundation of authoritarianism. Citizens taught that dissent threatens stability, accept control as protection. Their silence, presented as loyalty, strengthens oppressive systems. But beneath the quiet streets lies fear, and beneath the speeches of unity lies pain. Order sustained this way is a fragile mask over deep fractures. Schools, too, break voices in the name of discipline. Students who challenge ideas are often labeled as disruptive. Their curiosity is silenced in favor of neat compliance. This lesson shapes generations who equate order with obedience and mistake silence for intelligence. The broken voices of youth eventually create adults afraid to question. In families, the demand for order often silences the vulnerable. Children who challenge unfair rules are told to respect your elders. Spouses who raise concerns are told not to disturb the peace. This silencing may preserve appearances, but it erodes trust. Love without space for truth becomes fragile, a relationship built on fear rather than authenticity. Religions, when twisted, can also break voices. Faith, meant to offer meaning and connection, becomes a tool of control when questioning is forbidden. Followers silence doubts to maintain order within the community, yet suppressed doubt never disappears. It festers quietly, breaking faith more profoundly than honest questioning ever could. Workplaces demand order through hierarchy, where the voices of subordinates are often dismissed. Employees who see flaws in leadership hesitate to speak up. The pursuit of efficiency silences innovation. Over time, the organization suffers from its own refusal to listen. The broken voices of employees weigh heavily, though the cost is often invisible until failure arrives. The obedient mind convinces itself that silence is noble. It tells itself that maintaining order serves the greater good. Yet this belief masks the truth. Silence often protects those in power, while harming those without it. Broken voices rarely serve justice. They serve the comfort of authority. The burden of order is carried by the silenced, not the secure. The cultural weight of broken voices spans generations. Communities that prize conformity teach their children to suppress individuality. Each generation inherits not only silence but also the pain of unspoken truths. The result is a culture where order is preserved at the cost of authenticity. Generations live quietly, but never freely. Technology creates new forms of broken voices. Algorithms amplify some perspectives while burying others. Online, dissent can be drowned in noise, targeted by harassment or erased by censorship. People learn that speaking out risks attack or invisibility. In this digital landscape, order is maintained not by silence alone, but by overwhelming voices until they break. The most painful broken voices are those of conscience. People know when something is wrong, but obedience convinces them to remain quiet. The inner voice becomes fractured, whispering guilt and shame. This brokenness is not visible to others, but it is felt deeply by the self. The spirit carries the weight of truths it never dared to speak. Art often emerges from these broken voices. Poetry, music, and paintings become the only safe outlets for silenced truths. Through metaphor and symbol, broken voices speak without directly defying order. These creative whispers remind us that even when voices are broken, they can still echo in ways that inspire change. Broken voices weaken entire societies. When only a few are allowed to speak, progress stalls. Innovation, justice, and reform require dissenting voices to challenge norms. A society that silences its people in the name of order loses the very voices that could save it from decline. What looks like unity is often stagnation. The weight of silence is not evenly shared. Marginalized groups often bear it most heavily, their voices dismissed as disruptive or unworthy. Their truths are buried under demands for civility or order. The cost of this silencing is profound. Entire communities live unseen, their struggles erased in the name of peace. But broken voices are never completely destroyed. Even whispers can travel, carried quietly from person to person, until they gather strength. A single act of courage can inspire others to find their voices. In this way, order built on silence eventually cracks undone, not by violence, but by the steady rise of truth. The lesson of broken voices is clear. Order without freedom is a cage. Voices are meant to speak, not to be buried. When order demands silence, it ceases to be order and becomes oppression. To repair broken voices, we must honor them, listen to them, and protect them, even when they disturb the fragile peace. True order is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. Fear is the most efficient tool of control. It requires no chains, no visible prisons, only the imagination of the mind. When fear becomes the dominant force, thought recedes into the background. People stop questioning, not because answers are absent, but because the act of asking feels dangerous. In this way, fear doesn't silence truth. It convinces the mind not to search for it at all. The obedient mind thrives in fear. Authority knows this, which is why fear is often cultivated deliberately. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of failure. All of these keep people compliant. Once fear becomes stronger than curiosity, thought withers. the result is not true order, but submission born from terror. When fear replaces thought, imagination becomes an enemy. Instead of envisioning possibilities, the mind imagines dangers. Every risk is exaggerated. Every step outside the norm is painted as catastrophe. Innovation dies in this environment, for no one dares to experiment. Fear turns the gift of imagination into a weapon against its owner. Fear reshapes morality. Instead of asking, "What is right?" the fearful mind asks, "What will keep me safe?" This shift allows injustice to thrive, because survival overshadows conscience. The most harmful actions in history were not only commanded, they were enabled by individuals too afraid to resist. Fear paralyzes morality until thought no longer guides behavior. In relationships, fear silences authenticity. A partner afraid of losing love may comply endlessly, even when unhappy. A child fearful of disapproval may suppress their true self. Thought gives way to calculation, where every action is weighed not for meaning, but for safety. Fear becomes the silent scriptwriter of relationships, dictating behavior without words. Fear also erodes communities. Groups ruled by fear lose their capacity for honest dialogue. People smile, nod, and conform, but their minds are absent. Truth is hidden, creativity is muted, and unity becomes an illusion. The community appears strong, but its foundation is brittle, built on fear's fragile scaffolding. Workplaces use fear to enforce compliance. Employees afraid of losing their jobs stay silent about unfair practices. They avoid innovation that might fail, and they endure treatment they don't deserve. The workplace may look efficient, but its silence reveals weakness. Fear replaces thought, creating organizations that are obedient but never visionary. Schools, too, can cultivate fear. Students fearful of failure focus only on memorization, never exploration. They avoid asking questions that might expose ignorance. Learning becomes less about discovery and more about survival. In such classrooms, thought is replaced by rote, and curiosity becomes the first casualty of fear-driven education. Fear transforms leaders into idols. When followers fear punishment more than they value truth, they elevate leaders beyond accountability. Criticism disappears, replaced by blind loyalty. The leader grows unchecked, while followers bury their thoughts to preserve safety. Fear doesn't just silence individuals, it builds systems where power thrives without restraint. When fear dominates, silence feels rational. People tell themselves they are protecting their families, their careers, their lives. Yet this silence allows harm to grow unchecked. Fear convinces them that thought is dangerous, that obedience is safer. But the longer fear rules, the harder it becomes to remember what courage feels like. Fear also alters memory. People rewrite their own stories to align with their obedience, convincing themselves they never had a choice. Thought becomes distorted, reshaped by the need to justify silence. Over time, entire histories are rewritten under fear's influence. What was once truth becomes buried in the name of survival. Even spirituality can be corrupted by fear. Faith meant to inspire hope becomes a source of terror when obedience is demanded without question. Followers suppress doubts not because they lack them, but because fear tells them doubt is betrayal. Thought shrinks into whispers, unable to rise above fear's shadow. Fear convinces individuals that they are powerless. The mind under fear magnifies authority and minimizes self. People believe resistance is impossible, even when it is not. This belief is more powerful than chains, because it builds prisons inside the self. The thought of rebellion feels absurd, not because it is, but because fear has replaced reason. Fear thrives in uncertainty. The unknown is painted as more dangerous than the known. People cling to commands and rules, even harmful ones, simply because they are familiar. Thought, which might navigate uncertainty, is abandoned. Fear tells the obedient mind that safety lies only in what already exists, even if it is unjust. The fearful mind justifies its silence as wisdom. It claims to be cautious, pragmatic, or realistic. Yet beneath this mask lies paralysis. Wisdom considers risks and chooses carefully. Fear refuses to choose at all. When fear replaces thought, decisions are no longer guided by reason but by avoidance. Life becomes smaller, safer, but emptier. Technology magnifies fear's reach. News, algorithms, and propaganda highlight dangers constantly, convincing people the world is too perilous to question authority. Fear spreads faster than thought in this environment. The obedient mind scrolls endlessly, absorbing threats while forgetting to ask which ones are real. Fear thrives where critical thought is absent. The cost of fear is most visible in missed opportunities. Lives are lived half-heartedly, dreams are abandoned, and talents go unexplored. The obedient mind does not fail because it tries and loses, but because it never dares to try at all. Fear convinces it that failure is fatal, when in truth, the only fatal failure is silence. But whispers of thought always remain. Even in the grip of fear, small sparks of curiosity and courage flicker. A single question, a single refusal, can begin to restore the mind. Fear may bury thought, but it cannot kill it. To resist fear is to rediscover the self hidden beneath obedience. Breaking fear's hold requires courage, but not the absence of fear. It requires choosing thought, even when fear is loudest. It means asking questions, speaking truths, and taking risks despite trembling. Each act of defiance weakens fear's grip, reminding the mind that it was built to think, not to cower. When fear replaces thought, life becomes survival rather than living. To reclaim thought is to reclaim freedom, creativity, and conscience. Fear will always exist, but it must not rule. The obedient mind must learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear silence truth. Only then does thought rise again, stronger than the chains that tried to bury it. The road beyond blind submission begins with awareness. One cannot escape obedience until they recognize it as a force shaping their life. Awareness is like light piercing darkness. It reveals the chains that once seemed invisible. The first step forward is simply to see the difference between chosen obedience and blind submission. This road is not easy, for submission often feels safe. Letting go of unquestioned obedience requires stepping into uncertainty. The mind, long accustomed to following, must relearn the art of choosing, but growth always lives on the other side of discomfort. Walking this path means accepting uncertainty as a teacher, not an enemy. Courage is the companion of this journey. Without it, the weight of fear will pull the traveler back into silence. Courage does not mean being fearless. It means moving despite fear's presence. Each act of questioning, each spoken truth, strengthens courage. The road becomes clearer, with every step taken in defiance of blind obedience. The road beyond submission also requires reclaiming one's voice. Silence, once a shield, must now be broken. Speaking truth aloud is both a rebellion and a rebirth. The voice, long muted, begins to shape reality again. On this road, words become tools of liberation rather than instruments of compliance. Education becomes a guiding star on this path. True education does not teach obedience. It teaches critical thought, reading, questioning, and dialogue. Expand the mind beyond the limits imposed by authority. Those who seek knowledge actively equip themselves for freedom. Learning becomes resistance, and resistance becomes empowerment. The road is paved with choices, small deliberate decisions that defy the reflex of submission, saying no when it feels safer to say yes, asking why when silence is expected, stepping out of line when conformity is demanded. Each small act becomes a brick in the foundation of autonomy. Over time, the road widens into freedom. On this road, integrity replaces obedience as the compass. Instead of asking, "What will keep me safe?" the traveler asks, "What aligns with my values?" Choices guided by integrity may invite conflict, but they build a life rooted in authenticity. True peace comes not from blind submission, but from living in alignment with one's own conscience. Relationships change along the way. Bonds built on obedience dissolve, while those rooted in mutual respect strengthen. Friends, partners, and communities who value truth over silence walk alongside the traveler. The road beyond submission is rarely walked alone. It attracts those who seek the same freedom. Together, their voices create a chorus too strong to be silenced. Creativity flourishes here. Freed from the weight of conformity, the mind dares to imagine again. Ideas once buried under fear rise to the surface. Art, invention, and innovation thrive when obedience loosens its grip. The road beyond blind submission is not only a path to freedom, but a gateway to possibility. The traveler also learns the balance between obedience and autonomy. Not all rules must be rejected. Some exist for mutual safety and fairness, but the difference lies in choice. On this road, obedience is conscious, not blind. It is chosen freely, not forced. This balance turns submission into responsibility and responsibility into strength. The road demands resilience. Authority does not easily surrender its hold. Those who defy submission may face ridicule, punishment, or isolation. Yet resilience keeps them moving forward. Setbacks are not failures, but lessons, reminders that freedom requires persistence. Each challenge overcome makes the traveler stronger. History offers guidance on this road. The stories of rebels, reformers, and visionaries light the way. They show that resistance is not futile, that change is possible. Their legacies whisper encouragement. You are not alone. Walking beyond blind submission means joining a lineage of those who chose truth over silence. Self-trust grows stronger with each step. Submission weakens intuition, but freedom restores it. The traveler learns to trust instincts, to weigh evidence, and to make choices confidently. This self-trust is the heart of autonomy. On this road, the mind learns again to stand on its own, no longer bowing out of habit. Communities that walk this road together transform. Where once silence ruled, now dialogue thrives. Where obedience once chained progress, now collaboration fuels innovation. Societies that question, challenge, and adapt become resilient. The road beyond submission is not just personal, it is collective, shaping cultures that refuse to be silenced. The road also demands forgiveness. Those who once lived in obedience often feel guilt for their silence. But guilt, if held too tightly, becomes another form of chain. Forgiveness of self and others frees the spirit to move forward. The road is not about perfection, but about progress. Spirituality, too, takes new form here. Faith shifts from blind obedience to conscious belief. Questions are not seen as betrayal, but as part of the journey. The divine is approached through dialogue, not fear. On this road, spirituality becomes liberation, guiding rather than chaining the soul. Technology, once a tool of manipulation, can become an ally. With awareness, people learn to use it critically rather than consume blindly. They seek diverse voices, challenge false narratives, and share truths. The road beyond submission teaches discernment, transforming technology into a platform for freedom instead of conformity. The road is long, but every step reshapes identity. The once obedient mind becomes a resilient, questioning, authentic self. No longer defined by compliance, it is defined by courage and conscience. This transformation is not sudden but gradual, built on countless small acts of resistance that accumulate into liberation. The greatest gift of this road is dignity. To live without blind submission is to live with head held high, knowing that choices are one's own. Dignity cannot be granted by authority. It must be claimed by the individual. On this road, dignity becomes the reward for courage, the proof of freedom lived fully. The road beyond blind submission leads to selfhood. It is not simply about resisting commands, but about reclaiming life itself. The obedient mind bows, but the liberated mind stands tall. To walk this road is to remember that freedom was never something to be granted. It was always something to be lived. An obedient mind may keep the peace, but it also buries questions, limits vision, and hides possibility. The true weight of obedience is not seen in rules followed, but in the dreams left unspoken. You are not bound to accept the patterns handed to you. Your voice, your thoughts, your choices are the keys that shape a freer path forward. The end of blind obedience is not chaos. It is clarity. What you decide to believe and what you dare to say will decide the world you leave behind. The cost is real, but so is the reward of choosing your own mind.